Hey, what's up, everybody? This episode of Angles, as always, is brought to you by my law firm, Richmond Bona Personal Injury Attorneys. When the unexpected happens, expect Richmond Bona. And another awesome episode. Super pumped. The team keeps bringing us great guests. And this time we sat down with Matt Fairburn from The Athletic. You know, he's on the beat for the Buffalo Sabres, but he's covered the Sabres, the Bills, been a journalist his entire career, studied journalism in college. And we talked a lot about, not just about, this isn't a conversation really about like what happened to the Sabres or what happened to the Bills. I mean, we do cover that. So there's some interesting info in there. We really talked about, you know, his process, about, you know, what it's like to be a beat reporter, you know, what he's gotten to observe about the success or failures within such huge organizations where so much is on the line, and getting a chance to review or work with people where so much is on the line. So it was a really interesting conversation. He's very intelligent, very well spoken, and it's just an easy one to listen to. I didn't have to ask that many questions because he gave such great responses. So I hope you enjoy it. As always, if you like these episodes, we would really appreciate it if you could follow us on social media, like, subscribe, follow on anywhere you get your podcasts. Helps us keep these guests coming in. And hey, enjoy. So we're live. All right, well, we have to start now. Thanks for being here, man.
Absolutely.
I'm pumped to talk to you. I know we were going back and forth scheduling this because it sounds like your schedule was nuts during the playoffs. I promise you there's a lot I want to talk to you about. We're not just going to like talk about like the state of the Buffalo Sabres, but I have to ask, you know, what was it like covering that playoff run?
It was awesome. It was, the schedule was definitely something to get used to. You know, the first few years I covered the Sabres, April was pretty much wide open. May was pretty much wide open. And then, you know, it's different. I covered football for a while, and the playoffs in football, the rhythm is the same as the regular season. And the playoffs in hockey, it's just 100 miles an hour, you know, every other day, long road trips. But it was cool to be, you know, telling stories that meant so much, you know, to be in a place where it means so much to people.
Yeah.
Like that first home playoff game, it was like, I'm not sure I've covered anything that meant that much to so many people. And so I think that's something I'll remember. Like this playoff run, I'll remember for the rest of my career for sure. Yeah,
that feeling too is palpable. Like I have friends who come in from out of town, whether it's from, you know, New York City or different parts of the country, maybe guys like I was friends with in college, and like they feel it. You know, they have it. It's interesting, right? Because oftentimes when we build something up in our heads, we kind of get let down a little bit when like the thing actually happens. But I think to people who come in from the outside, it actually is built up pretty high, but then it far exceeds expectations when they come in, whether it's like they experience a Bills home game or experience a Sabres game, let alone, you know, really like a Sabres playoff game. So it's pretty awesome you got to do that.
Well, and that game lived up to it too,
right?
Oh, yeah. Like you said, you build it up, and the atmosphere met the moment, but then the game, you know, the comeback, and like it was a crazy moment. And there is something too about hockey that, you know, when the first few years I was covering it, it's like, you know how much it means to people here, but they didn't have, you know, the team and the product to root for. And hockey's kind of it's an underdog sport a little bit in America, right? Like, you know, the NFL is going to be important no matter what. Like people are going to be paying attention to the NFL. It's an event. It's a big deal. And so it was cool to see hockey in the spotlight, to see Buffalo as a hockey town kind of get the shine and get the credit it deserves. And, you know, we'll see if it's, you know, kind of just the start of something here.
Yeah, I know. That's my fingers are crossed. It'd be an interesting offseason. So we were talking off camera, and obviously did some research. It's interesting. Basically, Boston boy making his career covering the Bills and now the Sabres. I know you went back to New England for a little bit, but what's that been like? Like what is like your mental framework for that? Because I always wonder that, because you know you have guys who take, you know, you're with the Athletic and you're covering certain teams, or you have, you know, men or women who are covering teams and, you know, for local news stations or whatever, but they're actually from someplace else. Like, do you start becoming a fan of the new city or the new team you're covering? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, I think, you know, in this job, you're always trying to, you know, put the fan part aside. So it kind of works out that, you know, I am a bit of an outsider, sort of an objective observer of these teams. But you know, when I was setting out to do this for a living, you know, I went to Mizzou for college. I went away from home, and I think when I left home, I just knew the way the industry works is that the idea of, you know, going to school for 4 years and going back to Boston and breaking in to Boston right away was probably not realistic. And I was also just open. The more time I spent out there, the more I was open to just anywhere.
Yeah.
You know, I applied to jobs in Boise, Idaho, Lubbock, Texas. Like I was all over the place. I couldn't even tell you how many jobs I applied to my senior year. And it just so happened, you know, the one that worked out was covering the Bills for Syracuse.com. But I always had in my head, like, I want to go somewhere. And I was open to the idea of, like, I might go somewhere and make my life there, right? Mm-hmm. And I met my wife here, and Buffalo became that place. And we moved to New England for a year. An opportunity popped up, and it was like, oh, maybe this is a chance to try it out, get back home. And, you know, my wife was really open to it. My wife, you know, loves New England, and, you know, our friend group back there, my family's all back there. But it was pretty clear, like, pretty quick that it wasn't, you know, the best fit. And part of that was, you know, Buffalo. Like, mm-hmm. you know, it kind of gets into you a little bit. And, like, I've now lived in Buffalo. I'm coming up on close to as long as I lived in Massachusetts, mm-hmm. you know, if you consider the fact that I moved away for college. And so, yeah, it definitely, it starts to feel like home, and you start to feel a connection. You know, even if the fan part, you know, is still separate from what I do for a living, you feel a connection to the people and the stories, and that connection to the readership is what, you know, it's part of what pulled me back. I mean, mm-hmm. obviously there was, you know, life stuff too. And like, we had just had our first child, and, you know, we had a good support system back here, but I missed that connection to the readership and the relationship you build. I feel like that's everything in what I do. You know, if you don't have that, you don't have anything, especially with all the noise out there, all the different content now. Like, having that relationship with your readers and your audience is everything. And I just don't think there's a lot of places where it's like it is here in Buffalo.
How do you build that relationship? What do you think is the key? Because you're absolutely right? I mean, now we're in like the clickbait like era where it's like there's just crap everywhere. There's news everywhere, whether you want to call it news or not. You work for The Athletic, which is like extremely highly regarded, if not the most highly regarded, like sports outlet probably in the world. Like, but you're here in Buffalo. Like, how do you build that fan base here in Buffalo? What do you think is important?
It's interesting. I don't know. I don't know that I like set out to intentionally do it. I just sort of came here and was myself, and you know, tried to focus on doing good work and paying attention to like what people want, right? Mm-hmm. I think is always important. I think doing, like, I had a Bills podcast with Joe Biscaglia when I was on the Bills beat, and I have a Sabres podcast with Chris Baker. I do feel like that medium allows you to connect with fans in a different way. They see you, they hear you, and you're more than just a face, mm-hmm. And some words on the screen. So I think that definitely helps. But I think also just coming here and embracing the city, embracing the community, not really, you know, like, I'm here and I'm part of it. I'm not here to hop to something else. Yeah. And especially coming back now, I have that even more. It's like, this is where I'm raising my family. This is where I'm going to live for the rest of my life. So I think that helps. And you do have to just listen to what people want. I think there's an old school mentality some people have, that because we have these jobs and because we have a press pass and because we're there, that we know better. But ultimately, like, the fans are the customers, right? Like, they're the ones that are consuming the games, the sports, the product, and what they care about matters. Even if it's, you're like, Sabres fans want to trade for this player. It's like, well, it's not realistic, but that doesn't mean I don't write about it. It means maybe I write about it and tell them why it's not realistic, or look into it and explore those ideas. And I think just being able to meet people where they are is part of why I've been able to build that relationship. Mm-hmm. And you interact with people online and, you know, try to, you know, be as respectful as you can. And I think over time, you know, people start to trust you. And I think that's all you can ask for.
Yeah. You know, you mentioned essentially like being authentic, right? And I think that's another, we talk about it all the time on this podcast. Like, you have people who are wildly successful like you are, but like in all these different kind of like areas, right? But like, everyone talks about whether they knew it from the beginning or maybe more so like they learned at some point just being authentic, it was really the key. And just like focusing on what you love, and that kind of usually then everything kind of like comes with it, whether it's success, how you define it, like whatever. Were you always just completely true to who you are, like as a person, or were there some times where you're like, well, I should write this way, I should report this way because this is what I was taught in school, or this is how maybe the older generation of journalists do it, but now I need to, maybe it was working a little bit, but you realize, I need to be more authentic to who I really am. Because I personally have gone through that, like being like, oh, as a lawyer, you're supposed to act this way. As a CEO, you're supposed to act this way. And then you're like, wait a minute. Like, yeah, maybe some of that's true, but I need to be true to who I really am.
Yeah, I think maybe in some ways I'm still finding that, I guess, like every day, right?
Yeah, I think that's part of it.
You're always kind of bringing yourself back to your center a little bit and finding your equilibrium. I think it's probably easy in any line of work to, be influenced by different people around you. And I think that can be good in some ways.
Yeah.
Like, so yeah, I guess I am always trying to just be who I am and be true to myself. But I think at the same time that starts to change too, right? Like I have 2 kids now.
Yeah.
Like I'm a different person now than I was in my early 20s. So I was true to myself in my early 20s, but that was a different person, right? Like, whether it was your sense of humor changes, your voice changes, like your perspective changes. And so the types of stories I'm looking for now maybe even sometimes change, because I feel like I'm always gravitating to the guys in the Sabres room that are like new dads, right? And talking about stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so, I think it's a challenge all the time it's especially challenging with social media, and you think about all these press conferences and stuff are like streamed live, like there's people are watching, people are looking at you all the time. It's different even than when I started. So you're trying to block out all that stuff and just do the job that the way you know how to do it. But I am also influenced by different people around me and trying to borrow stuff from people, and I'm open to new ideas and new ways of doing things. Like the way to do the job now is probably different than it was 10 years ago, because audience demand changes and what people are interested in changes.
Yeah. What do you think are the biggest differences from your perspective in terms of like how you do the job, or how you said it, how you do the job now versus maybe how someone in your position was doing it at your age, 20 years ago?
Oh man, 20 years ago, we're looking at,
you can even go back 10 years. That's a long time ago.
I mean, it's it's so much different because of social media and video. Like we have, at The Athletic, we're doing more video now, right? And they want like these like, kind of these reporter-driven videos, right?
Yeah.
Where you're the face on the video, and it's like, I went into print for a reason, right? Like I'm not really a video guy, so you try to get comfortable with that. And I do think that instant feedback that you get now is so much different than what
That's a great point.
newspaper guys had years ago. I mean, there's definitely a big part of me that kind of wishes I was in the earlier days of newspapers, right, where you're not live tweeting games, you're not instantly getting all this feedback. Like I don't know if our brains are necessarily hardwired to be receiving that much feedback instantly the way that we do. But that's probably the biggest difference, is that you have to kind of separate. Like I said, you want to listen to the audience, right? Like they're the customers, they're the ones that are consuming everything, but you also have to know where to draw that line and not take too much of the 5 people on Twitter that are really angry about something as the fan base, right? Like, and act like the fan base all believes this, when it's 6 really loud people on the internet, and you go meet people in person and that's not what they're talking about. So having that human connection actually matters.
That feeling actually too, that's a great point. Like, it transcends just, maybe like looking at, feedback online. I mean, we literally we ran like a March Madness bracket on all the mean things people say about me online. It's hilarious. So there's that stuff, right? But then to your point, like whether you're on in an organization, a company, or whatever, a team, and it's always like the noise from from 2 or 3 sometimes can make you feel like, oh, this whole thing isn't working, or hey, this isn't going well, and you're just like focusing on these loud voices from a few when like maybe the masses are saying something different. I mean, how have you learned to deal with that? Because it sounds like you deal with it pretty well, but I got to imagine, like, you're a human being. I mean, like, people probably say some crazy stuff at times, not just like, hey, here's a crazy trade opportunity, but like, hey, you suck, or something even worse. Like, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, it's weird. It's like our brains, there could be 100 great comments and one negative one, and that's the one that you're like
glued to
thinking about while you're eating lunch. You're like, right? You're like, and you have to not. I'm getting better at it, but I'm not great at it.
Yeah.
I always joke with my podcast co-host Chris Baker, like, he's excellent at it, like just brushing it off and confident in what he's putting out there, and so not too worried about what's coming back the other way. But yeah, you have to find that line of like taking, even if it's not constructive feedback, being like, is there any truth in here that I can like build on and be better at? Is this person right in some way, even if they didn't deliver it in the way that they should have? But I also find, like, I used to get a lot of emails when I worked at Syracuse.com for whatever reason. Like, my work email was attached to my byline. And I always found that if you got like a really angry email, I would always respond and be like, hey, thanks for reading. Like, thanks for taking the time to like send an email. And almost every time the next email was like, oh man, I wasn't expecting you to respond. And all of a sudden we're having like a normal conversation.
Yeah.
Right. So I try to remember that too. And there is a point where you have to block some of it out. Like, just like maybe batch time. Like, okay, I'm going to look at the comments for 30 minutes and see if there's anything in there that I should be, responding to, but I'm not going to go back to it all the time. And I do spend more time, I would say, in our comment section and like in the comments of like our YouTube page for our podcast, because those are the people I feel like that are, social media. I think I've kind of tried to, block out a little bit more, just smart. Because look, if somebody's paying to subscribe to The Athletic, or somebody's taking the time to watch our videos, those are the people I want to respond to and interact with, more so than somebody who read the headline or, just saw something and got upset about it. So it's a work in progress, but I also feel like the more stuff, like, I'm busier away from work now with family stuff. And so that kind of takes your mind off it too. It makes you realize what actually matters. Yeah,
for sure. And speaking of that, is a great segue, because I was going to ask you, you're talking about like how journalism has changed. And obviously it's changed drastically in the last 10, 20 years. It sounds like now, I mean, I got to imagine, it's like, you feel like you have to be on all the time, right? It's like, I'm curious, like, because this is something, again, like whether entrepreneurs, leaders, people successful in their relative fields, like, can struggle with this, like feeling like, whether it's like my brain never turns off, or I like actually have to be paying attention all the time. I mean, like in your position, like, how does that work? Because, you're covering the Sabres, you got hockey insiders tweeting stuff all the time. You got, other social media accounts going off. You got, maybe now the Stanley Cup's on TV. You got YouTube. I mean, like, how do you keep up with all that? Like, I'm just curious. Like, it seems like it's just never ending.
Yeah. The way I could describe the feeling is like, you always have homework.
Yeah.
Like when you were in school and you're like, oh, I got this homework to do. I got this. It feels like that's just always the case.
Yeah.
I would say what I have a hard time turning off is like the need to constantly be feeding the beast, right? Like wanting to, there's people that have jobs in, even at our company where they write much less frequently, right? Mm-hmm. They write, maybe 10 to 20 stories a year, right? They do these big takeouts. And I was actually talking to my editor recently where it's like, that's like a pie in the sky type of job. Like, but I actually don't even know if I could like function if I had that job, because it's like, I would feel like it would take a lot of time for my brain to get used to not writing all the time. And so that's kind of the part I struggle with, probably more so than the idea of like, what's Elliot Friedman going to tweet? Like, I think when you're on a beat, you have a good idea for the rhythm of how news is going to come out, how it's going to happen, when it's going to happen. Sometimes stuff catches you by surprise and all of a sudden you're on the clock, and that's just part of life. But I think I do pretty well with that balance. And hockey's pretty good in some ways because by mid-July, things kind of slow down, and they actually take a break. Like when I covered the NFL, it felt like they never took a break.
Yeah, they don't.
Even when they were off, it was like somebody's going to get arrested, or somebody's going to, they're going to make some trade, or there's just somebody says something on a podcast. Like there's always just something. The NFL is just constant, and even from the end of the season till basically now, minicamp, there's always like an event happening. And in hockey, they do shut down from early July to early September. And so there's a good chance to unplug and refresh there. And I'm always home in the morning, to drop my kids off, unless I'm on the road, with the team. But like, I don't have to be at the rink usually till about 10:30 on a game day, maybe a little bit later. And then I'm back, to pick them up, because even on a game day, the afternoons are totally free. So, it's hard to work nights, like I do. That's been an adjustment, one that we've gotten pretty used to, though. And I think you just find a rhythm, and you I'm so used to the news breaking part of it that that part, and I do feel like it's just part of life now. Like it's just like in the background. But the part that's hard is the feeling like I always have homework. Like I always want to be. Like I took parental leave when my kids were born. Yeah. And it was like this, like, after a few weeks, you're like, oh man, like what are the readers thinking? It's not even what are my bosses thinking or what news is going to happen. It's like, man, these are paying customers, and I kind of want to, give them what they're paying for. And so that's the part that's always like this itch I can't fully scratch.
It makes sense. Like we actually, we talked to our young lawyers, about, kids come through law school, right? And they're like, they get, people like this. I got my list. I cross it off. And that feels good, right? But we start teaching them when they get here, like, look, that feeling is gone. Like you can almost imagine like you cross it off and it reappears, something new reappears. Or the way we like to try to describe it is like, you just got to get used to the feeling of like always having all of these balls in the air, but you just have to identify like which ones are made of rubber and which ones are made of glass. And the ones made of rubber, if you drop it, if you're going to drop one, drop that one because it's going to bounce back up. The glass one, don't drop that, right? Like, so there's always, again, like a lot of commonalities between industries. So you talk about, I mean, obviously you're on the Sabres beat for The Athletic. But obviously you didn't just start your career here. Can you kind of talk about, I know you went to journalism school at Mizzou, it was a great school, and then kind of how you went right to sounds like Syracuse.com. Just talk a little bit about, I don't necessarily, if you don't want to have to talk about every little stop on your journey, but like kind of like, what was your journey like and what did you learn along the way that led you to the opportunity to work with The Athletic?
Yeah, I got pretty lucky, I feel like, that I got that job at Syracuse.com. And
it sounds like a big job to get like right out of college.
Yeah, like not necessarily what I was expecting. Yeah. Like I had applied to be a high school sports reporter at the Lubbock Avalanche Journal, I believe is what the newspaper is called.
Like Friday Night Lights stuff?
Yeah, like and maybe help out a little bit on Texas Tech. And I was like, oh man, this would be awesome. Yeah. Like I would have taken that job in a heartbeat, and I didn't get it. And then like, there was a job out in Boise that I was like, this would be so cool, like moving to Boise. And I didn't get it. And so it was like, and then all of a sudden, Syracuse.com had never covered the NFL. And they were looking to do it a little bit differently. It was actually it was not a full-time position technically, or it was not a permanent position. Like I was getting paid a full-time salary, but it was on a one-season basis. They were going to try it out, see how it went, and if it went well, they would continue doing it and, make me permanent with benefits and all that. So that played to my advantage in a big way. Like I was fresh out of school. More experienced people probably saw that and said, well, I don't want to leave what I have to take a chance on something that might not be there in 6 months. And for me, I was like, I'm going to get to cover the NFL fresh out of school. Worst case scenario, it doesn't work out, and I have a season full of clips to take somewhere else. And I also they were thinking digital first, and I had a big time like digital background. I worked at SB Nation throughout college and did some stuff at Bleacher Report. So like that was the way I was already wired. I actually didn't get like a lot of people at Mizzou. It's like they spend their summer at these big newspapers across the country, these big newspaper internships. Never got one. Like tried but didn't. And so I was always like looking online, like,
Yeah.
and SB Nation worked out great. Like I wouldn't have gotten to where I did without, and some people wouldn't have done that because it's like, it's not the traditional, newspaper journalism. And even I think some of my journalism instructors just thought I was like blogging or whatever. And sometimes I was just blogging, but I was also covering events and finding my voice, like we talked about, building an audience.
Yeah.
Like, I was mostly doing NFL draft stuff. And so I had a little bit of an NFL audience, and Hank Doman, the editor at Syracuse.com, like we were just speaking the same language in the interview. And so I think it was November of that year that I got a call from the managing editor basically saying like, yeah, this is working. We're going to make it permanent. And I feel like it's easy to look, and probably similar in your industry, where it's like, I want the job at the place that's like got the name brand recognition, right? I want that attached to my name. And, I want to go to the Boston Globe or, one of these big papers. But going there helped me. Like I was able to kind of build something from the ground up and we did all sorts of different types of stories that I think people, wouldn't. Like the first day I was on the job, I was at, they used to do move-in day at Bill's training camp. Like it was something you would cover. Like you would interview the guys as they were moving into the dorms. And I was sitting there, I was texting my editor. I'm like, man, like these guys have some crazy cars. Like we should throw together a list of like, who's got the best cars. And he's like, I love that. Let's do it. And it's like a lot of people like aren't doing that.
Yeah.
Right? Like they're, whether they're above it, and I probably wouldn't do it now, right? Like I'd be looking for different stories, but I was 22 and I was like covering the NFL for the first time. I was like, let's just do something kind of quirky, kind of fun. And we did a lot of that stuff over the years. And I feel like it was part of how I built my voice and built an audience here. And because we were so online focused, like I think there was, we were just a place to find, we threw a lot at the wall and it worked, and we built a good audience. Had opportunities to go elsewhere a few times, but I stayed because of that relationship with my editor.
Yeah.
And just and Buffalo, like and the people on that beat at the time were good friends. And from there, I guess it would have been 2018 was when The Athletic launched in Buffalo. And when I got that call, it was kind of a no-brainer. It was like I had already been subscribing, and it was basically exactly my type of place as far as what their vision was, what their goal was, and a chance to maybe not be writing 10 stories on a game day, but like I had a chance to grow as a writer. And they were talking to Tim Graham at the time as well, and John Vogel, and we all got together at the Birdhouse in Orchard Park, because Vogel he was leaving the Buffalo News. He had already decided that he was leaving, and he was actually going to leave the business. And Tim's good friends with John. I'm good friends with Tim. I had never met John, so he's like, I got to get you guys together before John, exits stage right here, and see if you guys get along. And because The Athletic was talking to him as well, trying to convince him to jump on board. So by the end of the night, we hit it off, and it was like, I was going to take the job no matter what, but I was, I was like, cause this is a great step for me. And Vogel was like, I'm in, like, let's do this. And then they ended up hiring Tim as well. So that was sort of our first crew when we launched. And Tim's been a great mentor of mine. And so like the chance to work alongside him on the Bills and to get to know John, like it was a great opportunity. So it was, some people were like, oh, it's a risk, like joining this startup. I was like, not really. Like for me, I was in my mid-20s getting to work with some of the best people in the business. I viewed it very much the same way as the job coming out of college. It's like, if this doesn't work out, I still got to work at The Athletic, and I'm going to get to do some really cool stories, and I'm going to have, I was like, if this doesn't work out, we're all in trouble, right? Like the whole business is industry. In trouble, right? Like there's going to be a lot of people looking for jobs, and there's not going to be any jobs, right? So I was like, I might as well jump on this thing that could take off and get to work with some really cool people. And yeah, it's been amazing. I mean, the company's changed a ton in the 8 years I've been there, but it's, been a great place to work pretty much the entire time.
Yeah, I do have to say I love the way I love the way Tim handles. I'm just gonna say certain people on acts. It makes me laugh my ass off. You know exactly what I'm talking about. How has the Athletic was bought by the New York Times, right?
Yep.
I'm interested to hear about this because like not a lot of people, especially in Western New York, no, not a lot. I mean, like a little bit more these days because of 43 North, but like not a lot of people in Western New York have had the experience of going in kind of ground level in a real startup and then growing with it and staying with it as it's acquired by a huge parent company. Can you talk about, what the changes have been like and like kind of where you're at now and what your day-to-day is like working for the Athletic?
Yeah, it was, jumping in on a startup, I want to say 2016 is when the Athletic launched. So I feel like I got pretty early days, like not totally ground floor, but pretty close.
Yeah.
And man, it was such a blast. Like I see why a lot of these people in that world, in that like space, like stay with something, it gets sold, and then they go find the next thing. Like there's something so energizing about a brand new place and kind of writing your own rules in some ways. And just like they were saying yes to everything. We were, doing all sorts of, fun, different stories, tons of travel, like, and kind of shaping the culture of the company at the same time. So it was pretty cool. And I think we lucked out, or probably not lucked out, I guess, but we were very fortunate that it was the New York Times that bought us, because it was around, I think early 2021 maybe was the acquisition. And I mean, it's definitely a different place to work now, but I don't think it's, that's natural for any company. There's just more structure. There's more, they have different priorities. And so how we cover things might be a little bit different than it was. Like in 2018, if you were writing a couple times a week, but they were like big, takeout type of stories, then they were cool with that. But there's a little more, we're probably a little bit more traditional now in how we do it. But the fact that it was the New York Times, it's like, okay, this is a place with like strong journalism foundation, right? It could have been one of the gambling companies or, somebody else that bought us, and it could have been a totally different experience, but like the journalism comes first and they value that. And I think it's actually been, it's been good in the sense that you have the backing of the New York Times, right? Like sometimes our stories appear in the New York Times in print or online, and that has some weight when you're trying to get sources to talk or trying to get subjects to agree to participate in stories. It's like, hey, this is going to be a national type of story that could be in the New York Times. Like that's a name brand, and the Athletic's its own name brand at this point. That was kind of the funny part at first, is like nobody really there. I mean, there was markets where guys weren't getting credentialed, and so it's been a really interesting ride. But I loved the experience of working at a startup. It was just so cool to be there in those early days.
Yeah, there are, it's exciting. There are some people though who struggle when maybe the startup either gets acquired or has to become more structured. And then to your point, then they hop to like the next thing. But there is something, I think, like what you said too, it's pretty nice when the parent company is great, like the New York Times, and has that reputation, that background. The structure is maybe not as bad because you're given the more opportunities and resources. You mentioned sources. I would love to know, how do you develop a source? Like, how do you gain their trust? I mean, it seems like that's journalism 101. Like, if you're my source, I don't give up your name. I don't, like, how does that all work? Like, I'm just always very curious about, how you develop these, because obviously they're very key to writing a lot of major stories.
Yeah, I feel like this is the question I'm always asking myself, right? Because like sometimes it works really, like what works with one source might not work with the next, and it's an inexact science, like anybody in their line of work that networking is part of it. It's like asking, how do you make a friend in some ways, right?
Yeah.
Like it's going to be different for every person. And I think the challenge sometimes is recognizing that your interests aren't always aligned, right?
Yeah.
And, sometimes they might be. Like, you have to know the motivation of the person that you're talking to and why they would. You have to parse that every time. Like, okay, this person told me this. Why would they tell me that? Like, why do they want this out there?
Yeah.
And then kind of cross-reference that with somebody else. But what I've learned probably more than anything is that it's a long game, you know, and you have to recognize and remind yourself that it's a long game, like, often, you know,
Yeah.
and it's not going to happen right away. It's a lot of, you know, as often as you can, like, seeing people in person, face to face, always helps at different events. And, you know, the combine was in Buffalo here recently.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of people are in town. It's a good chance to just, and maybe nothing comes of that first conversation or the second conversation, but over time, they feel like you're somebody that they know, that they can trust, that you're going to handle things the right way. And that goes back to the way you do the job too. You know, it's not, oh, this person told me that, I'm going to run right to my computer and make sure that's out there. It's like slowly building on those things and knowing when to cash in, I guess. And, you know, when you really need something, and figuring out who you can trust. But it is such a long game, and something that you do have to be patient with, and you have to, you know, you got to be a human. Everybody does it differently. Like, I mean, I wish I could know what, like, Elliot Friedman's playbook is, right? Like, how did he, you know, because at some point you become Elliot Friedman and it becomes a lot easier, right? Because people want to know what you know. Right?
Exactly.
And they want to kind of trade info, but getting to that point isn't super easy. But you got to be willing to just put yourself out there and have people. Not everybody's gonna. Somebody told me early in my career, like, well, if this guy doesn't want to talk, like, the next guy might. Like, there's going to be a lot of people that don't want that back and forth, and you just move on to the next. Like, you just have to build up a thick skin for rejection and people saying no, and being in uncomfortable positions and asking for help too, right? Like, recognizing that these people, I try to not go in as a total know-it-all, right? It's like, I need help. I need to understand something that this person has expertise in, but also show the passion and the interest in it, right? Like, be asking the right questions. I think sources appreciate that level of attention to detail too.
Yeah, I got to imagine it's even more patience is required, you know, in developing a source. Because, like, I mean, it's not that hard for me to convince somebody to, like, grab coffee with me. If I'm like, hey, like, okay, yeah, maybe you work for somebody else, but, like, we can go to some place nowhere near your office. I just want to grab coffee. I want to introduce myself, talk to you. Maybe we get to work together someday. It's usually not that hard to do that, but I got to imagine, like, no one wants to be sitting with you at, like, Swan Street Diner,
right?
Like, having breakfast. So this is, like, a thing that has to, like, happen, like, over time through chance, or maybe not so chance encounters in public forums where it's natural to be talking or on the phone or email, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a big, like, of course you want the relationships with, like, the main stakeholders, right? Like Yarmo, Lindy.
Yeah.
Like, there needs to be some level of relationship there. And you also want relationships with other people, but they're also recognizing, like, a lot of it depends on who's in charge too, right? Like, and the culture that they've set and things like that. But yeah, certain staffers are probably like, I don't know if I'm allowed to be talking to you, right? Like, I don't know if, like, and so you navigate that. Like, I think that's where, you know, the way you do the job matters too, and the types of stories you do. Like, a lot of times you want to do an interesting story on something a little off the beaten path, right? And that requires picking up the phone or talking to different people in the organization. So then when they see you, it's like, oh, okay, now we have this foundation, right? They at least know who you are, and you've gone through that. Or even with players, it's like, hey, I talked to X, Y, and Z before I talked to the player. And they're like, oh, okay, like, you talked to, you know, my trainer or, you know, my parents or whoever. And then they're, you know, some guys don't like that. They're like, well, like, but some guys are like, okay, now I feel like I can talk to you in a different way.
Sure.
You know, because they go into autopilot pretty easily. But Yeah, there's definitely probably even, more and more. That's another thing that like 30, years ago, that these people, the access was different.
Yeah.
And so it was a little bit more intimate. You were a little bit more like reporters used to be on the team plane, right?
Yep.
And so there's a different feeling I feel like players had, or they would be picking up the newspaper, right? Tim Graham tells me stories all the time of like he would walk into the Sabres room and guys are reading the newspaper. And it's like, I don't know if I assume in hockey guys are reading maybe a little bit more of what I do. Like the Athletics a pretty big thing in hockey.
Do. Yeah.
But I'm sure they don't all subscribe, right? Like, they're on Instagram or they're on Twitter kind of getting their feel for what's happening. So there is a different dynamic between player and media now than there probably was a long time ago. So you have to go about it in different ways, and always fighting against the idea that like I'm always asking like why would this person want to talk to me, right?
Yeah.
Like, and you have to give them a pretty good reason.
Yeah, first off, if you're a multi-million-dollar a year player, don't be sharing passwords with your teammates for the Athletic.
Right.
Get your own subscription. Like, relax. Because that's the thing. Like the last question, kind of on that subject, was like when we see something like, and it's a leak. Like, okay, this information's coming out. It's coming from a confidential source. This might be a hard question, but like, what percentage of the time is it like the people know it's coming out? And they maybe to some degree either they know it's coming out no matter what, so they want to make sure they give their opinion on it, so it's factual, or they just they know it's coming out, they either want it out or they can't control it, so they want to make sure that they give context, versus they had no idea this thing is coming out. Like I'm the higher up or the owner of an organization, it doesn't have to be the Sabres, anywhere, like, and holy crap, I'm reading about this in the Athletic, like who said this, like we didn't want this out there. Like what is there a way to break down like how often one happens versus the other?
I'm trying to think. I try to almost never have it be that if the person is like the subject of a story, I try to never have it be that they're finding out about it when it goes to print. Now they might find out. It depends on the level of participation, right? You're always in my position. Now, a lot of people handle this differently, where they may not, circle back and check with. But in our position, we're pretty much required to do it. We have a conduct policy at the, with the New York Times. One of those things we thought, like there wasn't one when we started at the Athletic, but there is one now because we're representing that organization, that like if I'm writing about somebody, I have to at least give them a chance to comment.
Sure.
And so in that sense, it's not, a complete shock of what the contents are or what we're writing about. Now, if somebody doesn't want to comment or doesn't want to pick up the phone, maybe they would be a little surprised that it came out, but they at least know you're working on something.
They had the opportunity.
Right. And, and so it shouldn't be a complete and total shock. And there might be times where it is for people in other situations, but I would think that most subjects I've covered, like I think about, the Bills and the Sabres and like, the main power brokers. Like, I don't know how aware Terry Pegula is, like what reaches his desk in those situations. Like if I reach out for a comment on something, but the main, the Brandon Beanes and Kevin Adams of the world, the GMs that I've covered, the coaches that I've covered, like I can't imagine there's too many stories that I've written, if any, that have caught them completely off guard. Now there might be like a feature I'm working on that doesn't really involve them, so I'm not like, letting them know what's coming, and they might be a little surprised by some things that are in there, like, or if it's like a feature on an old player or something, like they might be a little surprised. But if it involved the people involved in a story, like the direct subjects, I always give them a chance to talk.
Yeah, I know you've been asked a million times about it. I don't need to like go into too much detail about the whole process or anything, but like, you had an article or a really big piece in 25 about the Sabres, and kind of what was going on there. And this was, about 6 months, I think, before Adams was fired and they brought in Yarmo. And I think, looking back on it, or even in the moment, it's pretty darn accurate. I mean, like it really set the table for what was going on and kind of, where things were going. And I think you sat down with Adams, right?
Yeah, he wanted to.
That's what I mean. Like, so it's like, I'm always curious, like then when it comes out, and I'm not asking you to reveal anything. Like, actually, same alma mater as Kevin Adams. We both played hockey in Miami. Great guy. Like, but I'm always curious whether it's that situation or others, like where then they see it, they're like, I sat down with you and like, oh man, like I don't like what I'm reading now. I'm just kind of curious how that goes, or if like you're like worried about it when it goes out.
That one I wasn't, because that was like a great example of, because he participated and because he sat down, like I had the story written, ready to go.
Yeah.
And, then it was like, because in that situation, it's like, I want to make sure I have everything I've gathered, everything that I've, all the odds and ends of the story, and then go to them to make sure it's not like, you're not going to go to them at the beginning and then circle back and be like, oh, actually, these 12 people said X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And I was not sure what to expect. Like, would he want to participate? Would he not? A lot of times, they don't want to, but he did. And we sat down and I told him, I said, I want to make sure that anything that is in here, you've had a chance to respond to, including, in that case, it's like you're going to sit down and you're going to say that, I'm not going to tell you who said what and, all that, but this was said and this was said. And there's this piece of information. Like, what's your version of how do you remember this? And so the final version of the story ends up being different because his perspective is in there, because he did sit down. And there were certain things that it was like, after talking to him, I wasn't super comfortable with the validity of something. Right. So it's like, if I'm not 100% sure, I'm going to take it out. And we also have a high bar for those types of stories at The Athletic, at the New York Times, where there were certain quotes that were in there that it's like, if this is an anonymous quote, it needs to advance the story. It needs to be providing some information that advances the story. And so it can't just be somebody bad-mouthing him for 2 minutes. Mm-hmm. And so there were some quotes that were on the edge of that line, where we had an editor, Mark Wolleman, who recently retired, who's one of the best we had at The Athletic, who was like, this can't be in there. This can't be in there, And I mean, the process of that story was 8 months.
I was going to say, it must take a long time.
It was like over the course of the season, gathering stuff, paying attention to things, talking to people, going back and forth with how we're going to shape it, how we're going to frame it. It changed because of how things happen, and it changed because he talked. So I would think he woke up that morning, if he did read the story, I assume it'd be kind of hard. Human nature would suggest it's hard not to. I can't imagine he loved it.
Probably read it very fast.
But I don't think, and he and I never talked about this, but like, I don't think he would have said, oh man, I didn't think that was going to, he had a chance. I think he probably walked out of our sit down with a pretty good idea of where it was going, what was coming. Yeah. And that was kind of my aim, is like, I'm not trying to play gotcha here. If you want to participate, then, we're going to have both sides of this story as best we can. And I think, like I said, I don't think he was thrilled, but I don't think he shouldn't have been surprised.
Yeah. I promise you it wasn't going to we're not going to spend a ton of time just going through like what the hell's going on with the Sabres and all that kind of stuff. But I have to ask, because there's no one better really to ask, like from your perspective, what changed with the Sabres this year? I mean, obviously Adams is replaced by Yarmo, and then it kind of had already started. It was about 3 games into it, but then there's this historic streak, and they go into the playoffs, and we all know what happened. Like, what happened? Was the change that big, or was it brewing? I'm just kind of curious, from your perspective, what you think happened, because I'm going to follow up after this with some questions about you just have such a unique seat into the running of a really, really big, high level organization, 2 organizations, right? So I'm curious, what your perspective was, what you think happened.
I think the general manager change was for sure part of it. it's hard to assign. I think guys in the room have a hard time figuring out exactly how much weight to give each individual event, right? Like they got healthy. Rasmus Dahlin started to turn a corner, had a lot going on, obviously, in the summer and early in the season. He comes back and starts, playing like himself again. They get healthy. There's a natural maturation that had to happen with a really young team. And, Don Granato used to talk about, once you cross that threshold, then it's like it'll happen. Like it'll seem like it happened overnight, but it took a long time.
Yeah.
But I also think if you ignore the general manager change, like you're not paying attention to how any business organization, like how it all functions on a day-to-day basis, like from a culture standpoint. And it could be different for every guy in the room. Like, I'm not saying that these guys were like sabotaging the season because of Kevin Adams, right? I think for a big chunk of the room, it was a wake-up call. It was a, whoa, like something has changed here, right? And I don't think Jarmo delivered some magic message. I think he came in with a pretty blunt message that added to that wake-up call that was like, okay, this guy means business. This guy is... this guy didn't draft me. This guy didn't bring me here. Like all of a sudden you start to lock in a little bit differently. And there probably is some element, like Kevin Adams felt the pressure. Yeah. And I think he had a hard time hiding that. And I think that spilled into the room at times where guys were feeling that. And there was a malaise that sets in, and there's this, 5.5 years on the job. He still has the job. Like, what's the direction? Where is this going? And you get that hard reset, and I feel like it wakes everybody up. Yeah. And it started, like you said, a little bit before that. And there was some chatter that it could be coming. And so I think if there was chatter that was reaching me, then the chatter was definitely in the room and in the building before that. And, guys talked about the leadership group got together in Calgary, and they had a dinner where, it was kind of a heart-to-heart situation where they basically said enough is enough, and they were going to start holding each other to a different standard, and felt like they didn't have much to lose either. Yeah. They were like, why not just send it and just, see what we can do? And I feel like when I walked into the building after that change was made, like you could just feel a difference. And I don't know that that's 100% Kevin's fault. It's just like anybody that was in the chair that long. I don't think he had the easiest time outrunning how he got the job either, right? Yeah. And that's more of a public perception thing than anything else. I don't know how big that was behind closed doors. I don't know that guys pay too much attention to that. But, the palm tree stuff didn't go over well in the locker room. It didn't go over well in the community. Yeah. But also how he got the job was hard to outrun, right? Like people, when he got into that chair, the perception in the fan base was like, this is not a serious hire. Like they didn't do a search. He doesn't have the resume. And he won some people over early on because he did a lot of good things. And obviously he built a pretty good roster here, right? Like he built this team. But when they made that change, there was definitely the attitude of the fan base shifted almost immediately. Think about how hard it would have been for the players to walk into the building early in the season and you go down 2-0 and people are chanting for the general manager to be fired. Yeah. It was almost like people weren't ready to jump on board with the team because they were so done with the general manager. Like it wasn't a sustainable situation. And like I said, some of that was Kevin's doing, some of that was just the circumstance and the drought and all these different things. So when they show up and they play Philly and the place is like ready to go and like people are all of a sudden like 100% behind these guys, like I think that really put a charge into them. So it was a million different things that I don't think those guys have all totally processed or pieced together how it actually happened. But, winning is addicting. and they got a taste of it, and they just kept going.
Yeah, it's wild how you have an owner with, Terry Pegula owning, the Sabres and the Bills, who were just on like two totally different trajectories and timelines and hopefully now everyone's kind of hoping that maybe they're more aligned kind of where they are with management and where the team is at. But, taking a step back, whether you're looking at the Bills from your perspective or the Sabres, you just have a really unique seat and a really unique perspective. Not only do you get to see all the games, you talk to all the people who know everything, you have relationships, a lot of them within the organizations. In your perspective, like what do you think you've learned, because I'm sure it's been a lot, about what the keys are to running a successful organization of that magnitude? Whether it's you're talking about leadership or communication or accountability. What do you think are the things that you've learned really make the biggest impact and lead to success?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because for a while I went from covering the Bills to covering the Sabres, and they were in very different places. And I think what happened, I mean, stability is a big deal, right? I think that's true of any business. Even in my seat, I've had the same editor for a few years for the first time at our company, and it makes a huge difference. The stability and leadership, not second guessing every year. Am I going to have a change in editor? Am I going to have it and I think you see that in the Bills and the Sabres. And even with how the Sabres are now, I think a big part of what happened and what made Kevin Adams' tenure difficult for him, he was put in a really tough position in the sense that he didn't have people around him at first. He didn't have a real experienced staff, and some of that was budget reasons and, a variety of different factors. But then everything that happened with Kim Pegula, I think, really changed, a lot of the day-to-day in that building. She's such an important, leader for a lot of people. And I think it took Terry some time to figure out, who he could trust, how he wanted to structure things. And, now he has Pete Gowelli, who has brought some of that stability that I talk about. And I think that has made a pretty big difference. Now, obviously, the Bills are, they fired their coach, so that has changed a little something, but they still, they leaned towards keeping Brandon Beane, I think, for that reason, to kind of have some things that are consistent. And I think they had a few different people in that role that Gowelli's in, and it took them some time to find the right person. It feels like they have the right person now, and it's made a world of difference with the Sabres, I feel like, just in terms of having that outside perspective. And sometimes the business does bleed into the hockey, right? The two go hand in hand, and I think you can't totally ignore that. Like I said, that Kevin Adams situation, it wasn't just not sustainable from a hockey standpoint, but it's from a business standpoint. These customers just don't trust the product. They don't trust the people that are running this thing. And I think that is a big deal. And it's hard to do in sports, to get your fans to trust what you're doing. I think the Bills are seeing that now, that Brandon Beane was the most trusted guy in Western New York 5 years ago. People would have voted him mayor probably. And now it's they, things can change quickly, and he has to kind of win back some of that trust, and it's a moving target. So it's, I do feel like both of the teams are in a pretty good spot, especially, when you consider everything that Terry went through, and, he had to find his equilibrium again as a person, I'm sure, and balance all that. And so you do need to know when to trust other people. Yeah. And I think he's found, some people that he can really lean on in both organizations. And, they've had a lot on their plate with the stadium and the Sabres run and all different things. But when you have a team around you, that can make the world a difference.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, stability sometimes, it can be hard to find at times in different stages of an organization, but finding it is key, right? And sometimes you do have to try different people in different positions and constantly reevaluate it. But that's actually a really good point. with Brandon Beane, when I think about him, like, talk about like the pressure of a position, a GM of the Buffalo Bills, a team that people are expecting to win a Super Bowl, and you fire the coach, bring in Joe Brady or bring up Joe Brady. And it's like the pitchforks came out in a really big way and the voices were really loud, but now they've kind of settled down a little bit. It's almost like there's a calmness, but as you know, I mean, that thing's going to come roaring back like in an insane way if they get off to a bad start or something. It's got to be interesting being so close, and because I know you have it seems like from what I've read, you have a good relationship with Brandon Beane. What are your observations about like that role and the pressure that comes with that role?
Yeah, it's wild because I feel like Brandon Beane, when I was covering Brandon Beane, I thought one of his strengths is his ability to communicate. Mm-hmm. And like, I thought he was like really good with the media, and as a result built up, a lot of cachet with the fans. I feel like people liked listening to him talk.
Yeah.
And, just really, felt like they were getting to know him, and they really trusted him. And it's amazing how that perception can switch.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think Brandon Beane has changed as a person much. Like, I don't have as much, interaction with him now as I did, but, he could be giving the same answers now, and people perceive it or react to it in a much different way.
Yeah.
I think it was fascinating to, look back at the WGR interview, right? And the response to that in the immediate aftermath, I think, was mostly positive. Like, people were mostly on Brandon Beane's side.
Yep.
And it was like, at the time, I remember thinking, imagine if Kevin Adams
oh my gosh
did this, right? Imagine if, he had said that, like what the reaction would be and how different it would be. So it's, like I said, it is always a moving target with these guys, and they have to, you could be really good in handling your media responsibilities almost in the same way. I did think that was a bit of a misstep on Beane's part, but he had people behind him. Like, people were, the team used it as like sort of the intro to one of their behind the scenes, right? Like, the people were largely on board with that type of reaction because he had enough results to back it up. But when things change and people feel like they need to kind of pick sides, McDermott or Beane, all of a sudden you get into this battle of perception, and it's a hard thing to do, but the results are what matter. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes in this day and age, like, fan bases are very, they kind of make up their mind. Mm-hmm. And it feels like, and this might be like a social media thing too, right? Where it feels like, okay, people are dug in on Brandon Beane. So it's like, even if it works, some people will be reluctant to give him credit, right? I felt that way with Kevin Adams. It was like, it got to a point where I thought, no matter what happens, like, people are going to give credit to anybody besides Kevin Adams, right? And now I think people have changed their tune a little bit because the team won, and they're like, okay, maybe he did some good things,
like,
right?
Ooh, sorry. Like the memes and the GIFs come out like, ooh, sorry, bud.
It's like, maybe this guy kind of knew what he was doing. Like, he picked some good players. He made some good trades, but it can be hard to overcome that perception. So, I mean, Brandon Beane's under a lot of pressure, and, I'm curious to see how that will evolve and how because I do think, I think what was unfortunate about that, and it happens because when you're in those positions, they're high stakes positions, and there's a lot of, people on the outside that are going to perceive situations a certain way. And when McDermott gets fired and Brandon Beane stays, they assume it was people fill in the gaps where they don't have the knowledge. So it's like, oh, Brandon Beane turned on Sean McDermott. But like, I do think that Brandon Beane is a good person. Like, I never pretend to know these people as well. Even when you're there all the time, it's like there's a version of them that they let you get to know. Like, Brandon, I feel like I got to know better than a lot of people that I've covered. Mm-hmm. And like, I feel like his head and his heart are in the right place with all this, but it becomes very much a results-driven business. And that's the bottom line for all these fans. And in a market like this where they're just starving for a championship, that's the bar. And they've set that bar with how well they've done. But now you've got to find a way to reach it. I mean, look at like the way things ended for Belichick in New England.
Yeah.
Look at the way coaches are treated with the Eagles, right? It's like it's a "what have you done for me lately"
100%.
type of thing.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah.
And lately, the Bills haven't reached the standard that people want them to. So that's something that's going to be on Beane until he figures out. He has a bigger title now, right? So more pressure, more responsibility.
Yep. No, perfect. So what have you done for me lately, by the way, is something my dad used to say to me as a young goalie. He would say it in a nice way, though. I don't want to make him sound like he was like emotionally abusing me. But yeah, I think that's spot on. So, all right, I want one last question for you. I mean, we already talked about how journalism has changed. And obviously with technology, I don't know, maybe even with AI, whatever. How do you think journalism will change over the next maybe 5 to 10 years? What do you see for like the future of it and like kind of like your role?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there is the video component that these companies are always chasing.
Yeah.
Trying to find the right formula for people just don't read the same way they used to.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's an ongoing challenge, I feel like. And I do think though that the written word still has some hold over people. Like there's still a lot of people that like to read. I think the big thing I'm focusing on is like sort of what we talked about at the beginning is like that connection with the readers. Mm-hmm. I think is going to be more important than ever. Like being able to kind of build a community. Mm-hmm. Like I think of it that way is like I'm building, like one of the things I'm most proud of is like the comment section at The Athletic on Sabres stories. It's like there's almost always 100+ comments on something I write, and most of the people I don't think are even responding necessarily to it's almost like this forum for people to talk about the team. And same with our podcast. Like I think you look around at writers that have gone to Substack or these different companies like the All City Network that has tried to be like community first, and I feel like that is a big piece of the puzzle that I'm trying to keep front of mind, because all these, I mean, there's social media is filled with all these like AI accounts or like different, aggregation accounts that are, but there's no real connection there. There's no, you don't even know where that information's coming from. Sometimes it's not even true.
Yeah.
And I don't worry so much about like AI in what I do. I never really have, because you have to be there.
Yeah.
Right. Like I maybe I'm naive, but I just can't envision a world where like AI could do the job poorly, but I don't think AI could do the job well.
Yeah, I agree.
But people have to trust you. People have to want to seek out your opinion, your voice, your angle, and that part of it is still going to be front and center. And that's a foundational thing with journalism that hasn't changed over the years, is like if people trust you, that's everything. So there will be little things that change, I'm sure. I'll have to do more videos and get comfortable in front of a camera or, find different ways to connect with, but it all comes back to connecting with the audience, right? Yeah. And that's what, a lot of our bosses have said. It's like part of this is just meeting people where they are, right? And giving people a different way to find us, a different way to connect with us. And that I feel like is everything. It's like, even if I'm the objective observer of this team, but I'm also trying to be the eyes and ears for the fans and trying to, I guess, like capture these moments for them. Like, I still think people wake up after a game and want to kind of relive it.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And I'm always thinking like, what can I find? What can I observe? What can I unearth about a game that tens of thousands of people watched, and give them a little something different to talk about? Like after the Sabres got eliminated, Alex Tuck is sitting at his stall in full gear. And it's like, okay, like this is something that you don't see on TV. Let's bring that to people. And so, yeah, it'll change and I'll have to adjust and kind of, but I always will keep coming back to like, what do people want? And how am I building that relationship with people?
I love it. Dude, this is awesome. Thanks for doing this. I know people can find you on The Athletic, but where else can they find you, like on social media? And can you tell people where to find your podcast?
Yeah, people can find the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show wherever they get their podcasts. We're on YouTube and everywhere else. YouTube is probably the best place to, jump in the comments with all the crazy people that listen. And same at The Athletic. That's where that's where I like to kind of connect with people the most. I'm on X at Matthew Fairburn, on Blue Sky at the same handle. I don't use too much besides those two. I'm still I love the written word, so awesome. I still focus on those platforms. But who knows? Maybe you can find me on Instagram and, God forbid, TikTok at some point. That's when things have changed. But that's the best spot to find me.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yep.